Well, good morning, everybody. And good morning to those who are gathered out in the southeast of the city. And for those in that distant eastern wasteland of Sherwood Park, good morning to you too. We hope you're having a beautiful morning. The sun's out, the heat's coming, and I love it. If we can crank it to plus 35 each day, I'd be a very happy man. I know most people here don't like heat, that I hear the complaints, but give me plus 35 and I'm gonna relish it, I'll enjoy it, and I'll probably golf more and my game will be better. I kind of feel like coming back here is a bit of a reunion for me. I started at the Mustard Seed back in 1999. So I have had the wonderful opportunity of connecting and journeying with Central Baptist through many different ways. Central is one of the founding churches for the Mustard Seed, and it was part of that vision, along with other churches in the city, that really started the work of the Mustard Seed. And so being able to come back here, I can see faces that I've known over the years. There's former staff here, numerous people have volunteered. Some of you probably even got married in the old building and were baptized in that old building. And so that relationship goes way back. And so I am thrilled to be back here again. I can remember back in 1999, every third Thursday night, Central brought the best spaghetti in town. There's a family here, and I wish I could remember their names, but that was 1999, so I don't remember the names. But they came and they brought youth with them, and numerous people from here to come and serve down at the Mustard Seed. When I was preparing to kind of come and do a bit of an update on what the Mustard Seed's been doing over the last few years, and what programs we're running, and what changes are going on, I was actually quite profoundly shocked to go, we have, the doors that we've gone through and the things that we've done in the last 2.5 years is incredible. God has been working through the Mustard Seed, and the opportunities and the programs and the supports just blew me away when I thought our life now is sort of PC, pre-COVID, and then post-COVID, right? And kind of when I was thinking what we're doing 2019, 2018 to what we're doing today, is taking a dramatic shift. And so I'm excited to share with you what's been going on at the Mustard Seed. I know Jeremy's been kind of leading you guys through this series this summer on the Psalms of Ascent. Psalms 120 to 134, so that stretch of 15 Psalms. And what I find very interesting about this sort of stretch of passages is it's kind of Israel remembering the ups and downs of their relationship with God. They look through it and they remind each other of this journey. Israel's journey is not directly up. They had quite a few downs through the Old Testament. As you read through it, they kind of go through this cycle with God of getting close to God and then falling away from God. And these Psalms kind of remind them of that. If you read through the whole stretch, you'll see things around the oppression, being in exile, Psalms that give a longing for home, of wanting to return to Jerusalem. Psalms of celebration. There's Psalms where they're seeking peace, seeking God's mercy, what it means to live in obedience to God. So they kind of, this stretch, and they sing these while they are making their way up to Jerusalem for the feast. So as they're heading to go gather for a week of celebration, to connect with family and friends and community and just this excitement, they sing these Psalms to remind them of the journey that they've been on and how faithful God has been, and at times how unfaithful they were. So today I'm going to focus on Psalm 128. Blessed are all who fear the Lord, who walk in obedience. You'll eat the fruit of your labor. Blessings and prosperity will be yours. Your wife will be like a fruitful vine. Your children will be like olive shoots. Yes, this will be the blessing for the man who fears the Lord. May the Lord bless you from Zion. May you see the prosperity of Jerusalem all the days of your life. May you live to see your children's children, and peace be on Israel. And so this one was to just remind them, as they kind of made this journey up to Jerusalem, of how faithful God was, and also about the outcome of being obedient and faithful to God and God's word. They're reminded about this relationship and how God had blessed them. And you can look at the different sections of this psalm. And a lot of people just focus on that middle section, around family, right? Your wife will be a blessing to you, and your children will be a blessing to you 90% of the time. My wife is an amazing blessing to me. She's such a blessing. She's sacrificing her time to stay in Canmore with my youngest daughter to make sure she's doing okay out in the mountains by herself this weekend. And I left her last night, and she just reminded me what a blessing she was to me, and her sacrifice to stay in Canmore over the next 4 days. But if you go to verse 2, it states that the fruit of our labor and the blessings and prosperity will be yours. And I actually want to talk today in more of a corporate context of this. I want to talk about the mustard seed and its faithfulness and its obedience to where God has taken it and what God has called of it. You see, over the years, I've been able to kind of be a witness to both the ups and downs of the mustard seed. I could sing a lot of these psalms as we've gone through trials and different tribulations, and we've had our moments of that we weren't so great, and then we had other moments where we were absolutely amazing. But God has been faithful. And over those years, to be able to witness this and go, okay, just when I thought things weren't going well, God all of a sudden opened a new door and continued to bless us. It didn't matter, our programs have started, they've stopped, new things have come, old things have sort of ceased, but it slowly kept moving forward. And I do look at this and go, I think a huge part of this is because there's been a faithfulness to God and what God's called us to do and our work with those who struggle in our city. For 35 years, the mustard seed has been a beacon downtown for people who struggle with mental illness, addictions, who are experiencing homelessness, the impacts of poverty. But through it all, God's been faithful. So today, I want to take a little bit of time and take you on a bit of a journey over the last number of years. A lot of us, our lives completely turned upside down 2019, 2020. And things were no different for organizations such as ourselves. And I hear last week Hope Mission was here. All of us got turned upside down when COVID hit. All of a sudden, new health measures were coming in. Things that we used to do, we're no longer allowed to do anymore. Places that were open were now closed. The number of people we could serve dropped dramatically as all of a sudden capacity limits were put on our spaces. For those of you who've been around, our evening meal program has been sort of a staple of the Mustard Seed for 30 years. You could come down and get a meal at the Mustard Seed. When COVID hit, that ended. We quit serving meals for the first time in 35 years. And it was hard. Our staff were shaken. They were left kind of wondering, what are we going to do? How are we going to serve folks if we can't have them come in? The public health measures that came in limited our ability to serve public meals. We couldn't just put food on a plate for somebody and have them sit in the old mustard seed and enjoy a meal. And so our staff got together and they started thinking, okay, people are still hungry, people are still in need. How are we going to continue to serve and support them? And so somebody came up with this wonderful idea, and they said, well, if they can't come to us, how do we go to them? And that one discussion was the beginning of a program that we started called Dinner to Door. Dinner to Door basically reversed the system that we had before. We made the food, we cooked the meals, we packaged up the meals, and volunteers took them across the city to those in need. At its height, we're delivering 1,400 meals a week to people. And that was through volunteers such as yourselves who came weekly to make sure that meals got out to those in need. One of the things COVID did during this time, too, was it gave us a bit of an ability to sort of stop. The mustard seed has run pretty hard over the years. And we never really slowed down enough to really stop and just hit the brakes and go, okay, what are we doing? And is it effective? And is this the best we can do? And having to stop our evening meal program kind of just allowed us to do that. We just hit the brakes, we slowed down a bit, and we started looking at how we help people who are struggling with food security. And so in 2020, the only thing running out of the old church building at that time was our food bank, which continued to serve about 600 people a month. And we sat down and we started looking at food security and saying, well, we do a lot of emergency responses to food security, but are we actually changing people's lives? Are we making people more food secure or just dependent on us for a meal every night? And those are tough questions to ask for an organization that, had been doing something the same way for 30 years. But we asked those questions and we came back and said, you know what, we actually need to shift our focus and start addressing the reason why people are coming to the mustard seed for food. People should be food secure in our city. They shouldn't be dependent on a food bank or evening meal program to be able to eat. And so our staff got together and they started coming up with some ideas, and just recently they put together a whole plan which works with people individually as they come through our door. Now, a lot of people come through and they do need emergency food. They need it right now because they have no food in their cupboards, or they're sleeping outdoors and they have no food. And so we need to start working with them and make sure they have food immediately. But we don't need to stop there. They said that's a starting point. And so now when somebody comes through and they're at our food bank or they're coming through some of our food programs, we actually get to know them and go, okay, well, what are the barriers for you being food secure? Is it the fact that you don't have the appropriate finances, that you're not on the right level of supports that you should be on? Is it because you actually don't have the skills to know how to cook a lot of things, so you buy the most expensive but the cheapest stuff and you just don't know how to actually, use a kitchen? Well, let's address that. So now we have programs that are looking at everything from how to shop properly, how do you shop on a budget, and how do you cook the stuff that you can get a hold of. For some people, it's even when they get their food bank hamper, they don't know how to cook half the stuff they're getting. Who knows how to cook a rutabaga? I mean, I don't know how to cook that, but our folks want to go, how do you cook what you get? And so we're moving towards more around education and more around let's address the issues of you being food insecure. I could go on and on over the impacts of food insecurity on people. Everything from having to choose between rent and food to your health, physical health, mental health. There's a lot of things connected to healthy diets, and that's the direction we want to go. We want to actually start addressing the reason why people are showing up at our food depot or our evening meal line and break the cycle. Now, prior to the pandemic, the Mustard Seed Edmonton had never run a shelter. That just isn't something we ever did. It wasn't part of our organizational mandate. It wasn't part of our vision. We just never did it. Hope Mission did a great job of doing it. We Act, the Women's Emergency Accommodation Center, there were other organizations doing it. And in 2019, this all changed when the pandemic landed. Early 2020, we had the city of Edmonton approach us and say, would you operate an emergency shelter for us? And like I said, we had no idea what God was doing when this pandemic hit. In November 2019, I never thought we would have been running shelters or opening shelters or would have been part of what we do. To my surprise, 4 months later, we've been asked to run a shelter down at the Kinsman Center, sleeping 100 people a night. And so that was the first experience for the Mustard Seed at operating an emergency overnight response shelter here in Edmonton. And we didn't realize that it was sort of our training for things to come. Because we had a steep learning curve for an organization that had never run a shelter. We didn't know what it meant or how much work it was to do it. But over the course of 4 months in the spring of 2020, we learned a lot, and we learned quickly. And we thought, okay, we did it, we're done. And it was literally about a week before we closed the Kinsman Center that a request came again from the city of Edmonton that we could open another emergency shelter for the winter of 2020. And at the same time, we were also over at Expo Center. And I don't know how many of you remember the Expo Center. It was a drop-in center for about 8 months. And we saw on average about 1,200 people a day come through the doors there. And so we were part of that. And then they'd also asked us to do this other shelter. And it ended up being just south of here in an old warehouse we were using. And we were sleeping 100 people there. And then came the big request. Would you please come and be one of the main partners at the Shaw Conference Center? And the Shaw Conference Center was, I'm going to find the best words to put this. It was an experiment, not one I'd repeat, but it had a huge learnings because we opened up, along with a couple other partners, a 24/7 drop-in out of the Shaw Conference Center that slept at capacity of 300 people. Now, these are Edmonton's most vulnerable, some of our most complex individuals who struggle with addictions, mental illness, they're experiencing homelessness, and a whole variety of other stuff. And this place ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it was open. We slept people at night, and then there's all sorts of sports and services during the daytime. But it was a controlled, chaotic environment, if you can imagine what that looks like when you come down and you see the number of people coming and going out of there. Our count at the end of 6 months was 5,000 unique individuals access services there. 5,000 Edmontonians showed up there to access services, to find shelter, to find respite, to get clothing, to get food. And that number blew us away. That 5,000 unique individuals showed up there. And when we talk about being a blessing, one of the greatest blessings in that was over the course of 6 months, our staff responded to 750 overdoses. 750 people overdosed in that facility over the course of 6 months. 748 of them lived. If you want to talk about being a blessing on somebody's life, save their life. And our staff did that over and over and over again without judgment, without condemning them. They didn't chastise them for overdosing. They didn't, throw them out or tell them that they're useless. They loved them and cared for them and were compassionate. And for some of them, they saved the same person's life over and over again of somebody who's struggling with addictions. So that was the blessing of that whole winter, was the number of people who are still alive today and in our city. And our staff was there to be a blessing on them. So that winter ended. The city came back to us again and said, hey, you guys did a great job. Can you go do another one out of Commonwealth? So last winter we opened up another shelter, slept 200 people a night, and provided all the supports and services that we did at the Shaw Conference Center and continued to do really good work there. And all this is to prepare us for opening our own shelter. We're probably about 3 or 4 weeks away from opening a shelter on the south side here. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Neighbor Center, but we have been under construction for about a year, and we've added a second floor to it, which will be a housing-focused shelter for 40 people, and it should open up sometime late August, early September. And we're really excited about this because to have a place where we can, first off, get people out of the elements, but also to start working with them right there and say, when you come through our door, it's a starting point, it's not an end point. The first thing you're going to do if you're going to register with our shelter is you're going to meet with a housing worker. Because everybody deserves to have a home. Everybody deserves to have someplace safe to be. Nobody needs to be sleeping on a mat on a floor in a shelter. Not in a city as affluent as Edmonton. Not in a country as affluent as Canada. And so our shelter is going to be focusing, as soon as you come through that door, what are all the barriers that you are facing that keeps you from getting housed? And similar to the food security, it's asking those questions. Is it funding? Is it mental illness? Is it just, for a lot of people, they don't even have a single thing of ID, and maybe that's where we need to start, is they actually get you your ID so you can apply to get the right funding to get you into a home. Because once we get you into a home, we can start working on all sorts of other things. But it's hard to be homeless and actually address a whole bunch of other issues when you're homeless, because then your whole focus day in and day out is where am I sleeping, where am I eating, and you spend your days caught in this cycle of, well, what time's intake at the shelter, what time's lunch, where do I have to go to get some clean clothes, where can I go to get a shower. If all those things are taken away and you have a place where you eat, you have a place where you sleep, where you shower, then we can start working on all that other stuff. But until you're housed, until you have a home, it's really hard to work on that other stuff. People say, well, why don't they just get a job? If you don't have a home, try getting a job. You don't have a place to, as one of the homeless guys I've worked with just said, well, I don't even know what part of the city I'm gonna wake up in tomorrow. I might be south side, I might be north side, I may be over some friends over on the east. And so for me to try to get to a job somewhere, on the west end, I can't tell you if I'm gonna be there in the morning, because who knows, I might be, way off in the south somewhere sleeping, and to get there, I'm unable to get there. And then where do I shower? Where do I change my clothes? Where do I get ready for work? All those questions. And housing is the answer for a lot of this. Which is the perfect segue. Housing. The mustard seed over the years has gotten into housing because we believe in it. And I'm here today to be, hopefully, new news for you, but very exciting, is we're just opened last week, 84 units of permanent housing about 12 blocks from here. So just south of United Cycle, we have a new building called Prairie Manor, and it's 84 units of permanent housing. We just opened, I think we took our first 7 residents last week. I believe we'll get 10 more this week, and we'll keep slowly filling it up till we hit 84. And one of the floors in there is a sober living floor for those who are trying to break the cycle of addiction. And then one of the other floors is for women only, because we do recognize that there's different needs for the women who are on the streets today, and we want to make sure we had a safe place for them. But it's exciting for us to be able to offer people permanent housing. When you come into the door, when you walk through that front door of the lobby and you're welcomed by staff, that's your home. It's not a shelter, it's not transitional housing. You don't have to leave. You can hang your pictures in your apartment, you can set it up the way you want it, you can get the food you like to eat. This is your home. And there is little that you can experience the sense of joy is watching somebody walk into their first home, especially if they've been on the street for 10, 12, 14 years. It's an incredible experience to see them, and you almost have to convince them repeatedly that this is their place. They don't have to leave. They don't have to keep their stuff packed in their bag. They can put their stuff in the closet. They can unpack their backpacks. This is their place. And we've had some of our residents who come through, and the staff remind them month after month, this is your place. You don't have to leave. You don't have to plan for an exit. This is your home. And that, I got to tell you, is exciting. That's when I know the mustard seed is being a blessing to our community. When you see those that we have been called to work with experience that blessing, it's a pretty incredible experience. We do have 2 other permanent apartment buildings in town. We have one called Westwood Manor, which we've had for, maybe 15, 16 years. And then we have another one called Open Door Manor, which focused on men and women transitioning out of prison. That was its main focus when it started. And now it's a supportive living environment for just those in need. And so Mustard Seed gets to be a part of this. And it's exciting to be a part of giving people an opportunity to have a home. So the other part is our community hubs. So most of us know poverty no longer just exists in the center of Edmonton. Poverty is across Edmonton, and it's showing up in all sorts of places. And as Mustard Seed looked, we said, well, we don't need to just be downtown. We need to actually go to where people are struggling. And so that's why the Neighbor Center is out here on the south side, because we know there's a substantial number of people who call the River Valley home and spend a lot of time up around the White Avenue area and are struggling. And so we want to provide support services where they were rather than telling them to come to us. And so we are doing the same thing out on the West End. We have a little place that we partnered with a number of years ago called the Christian Care Center. And I'm excited to announce that we're also looking at building another apartment building on the West End that will provide roughly 30 to 40 units of housing for people out on the West End who are struggling with homelessness. And it doesn't take a long drive around the city to see the different camps and the setups of tents and that in different parts of the city starting to emerge, to go, you know what, there's a problem here in Edmonton. Homelessness is not decreasing. And so in response to that, if housing is the solution, then we need more housing. And so that's the motivation for us to now look at doing a build out on the West End. And this little Christian Care Center, I don't know how many people may have driven by it. It's a nondescript little building. It's like doing a drop-in in your grandma's living room. This little building is about 1,200 square feet. It has a small little sort of area where people can kind of come and sit, enjoy a meal, access some services. And we've seen the number of people coming there double in the last 2 years. And it's only open for about 3 hours in the morning just for breakfast and to pick up a few things. And right now they see about 120 to 140 people in a 3-hour span coming to get breakfast. And a lot of them are sleeping rough down the ravines out on the West End. And so we recognize just this need keeps moving, and we need to be responsive to that. And the other one is the Mosaic Center. Now the Mosaic Center is sitting out on the northeast side of the city, out in the Baldwin Belvedere. And just before COVID hit, we had moved into a new building and started the renovations. COVID landed, and all of a sudden we couldn't provide services anyway, so it was a good time for us to do renos. And so over the course of about 18 months, we renovated 3 bays in a strip mall. And we now have a beautiful drop-in center with a huge commercial teaching kitchen in it, and then a drop-in, and then some office space. And then Mosaic Center is unique because it works with families. We are really working with a lot of families who are living vulnerable out in that area. There's a lot of newcomers and a lot of people who are living on some sort of social assistance. And the Mosaic Center is focusing on that. They've got programs for kids that are struggling with poverty. They're helping with parents. The kitchen thing that I talked about, the food security, is really big with families. How do single parents who are on social assistance actually provide healthy food for their children? When, as we all know, the price of everything keeps increasing, their social assistance checks do not match the increases in price of food. And so really working with them. So they're actually doing some collective kitchens where parents and children can come and learn how to cook together. They're doing the kitchens, they're doing community gardens, and they're finding ways to supplement people's diets and work with these families who are in need and don't have enough food. And it's tough to talk to a single mom who has to decide between medication, rent, and food. Which one trumps what? And we've met parents that do go without because they make sure their kids have. But as those of us who are parents know, energy is required for parenthood, and you cannot deprive yourself long without food before it starts to impact your ability to be a parent and to parent well. And you see the cycle that they get caught in. And so we really want to be out there and being a blessing to those out in that area and working with these families. So from the community hubs, like I said, it's been a crazy couple of years. This is all stuff that has happened in the last 2.5 years. When I was putting this together, I was like, wow, I just kept adding stuff, and then a staff member would remind me that I forgot something. And they say, oh yeah, what about this? And so there's a lot of stuff going on. 2019, we opened a thrift store. And it's out on 65th Street and 118th Ave. And it's the first time the Mustards ever got into the thrift store business, and so it's another learning curve for us. But we decided to do it for a couple of reasons. One is to provide low-cost clothing to families in need. People go, well, don't you just give it away? We still do. We still give away emergency clothing to people. But when you talk to families and parents, there's dignity in purchasing their own stuff. There's dignity in the transaction. Nobody wants to have an identity as just a recipient of charity. There's pride on parents' face when they can come in and buy the clothes for their kids. And we've learned this over the years through other initiatives, that it's important for them to do it, to say, I bought this for you. It doesn't matter if it was $2 for a pair of jeans or $20. For them to be able to say, I purchased this, there's pride in that. You talk to them, there's a sense of, I don't want to say shame, but if you continually get stuff given to you over and over, they just feel like, I got nothing to offer back. I have nothing to give back for it. And it wears on your ability to have a healthy self-esteem. But when you can purchase it, and like I said, even if it's a cheap discount price, there's pride in that. We run a thing called the Family Gift Center at Christmas time. And I don't know how many of you may have donated to it, but we collect donated new toys, and we set up a store at Trinity Christian Reformed Church out in Baldwin there. And parents can come and they can shop, and they can purchase the toys. And I think it's like $2 or $3 a toy. But they can come in and they can pick the toy that their child would like, and they can buy it. And that has just exploded. We have so many parents who are so thankful for it. And if they come in and say, like, I've got nothing, we will make sure they leave with something. But most of them want to come in and they like the idea of purchasing the present for the child. They pick it out, they come up, they pay for it, they take it home and wrap it. We only have new toys there. It's not a secondhand thing, because we want to make sure that this experience is dignified all the way through. So that's something we've been doing for about 5 years now, is this Family Gift Center. I'll stick that out there. We're looking for toys in the fall for this Family Gift Center. One of the other unique initiatives has just exploded over the last year is we are now a key partner with the Edmonton Police Service. We have worked alongside EPS for many, many years, but this is the first time we've actually sat down and entered into a contractual relationship with them. And we're part of a program called HELP, which stands for Human Engagement Liaison Project. The police picked the name. Hence the Human Engagement Liaison Project. But what it is we have staff, and they also pick the title for the job. They call them navigators. They can go by all sorts of terms, but what they are is they go along with a constable, and they go out on calls. And they work with the top 500 people. They have a list, and I'm not going to get into the whole schematic, because the police have a whole matrix of how they figure this out. But there's a top 500 list of people who have the highest calls for social disorder. And so this isn't criminal. This is peeing in public, sleeping in the doorway of an apartment building, loitering in places they shouldn't be, stuff like this, right? And rather than just showing up with the police, and the police pick them up, throw them back in a car, and either drive them off and drop them off somewhere else, or take them downtown to the cells or whatever, they show up with a navigator. And our staff and the police officer sit down with this person together and go, okay, what's going on? Why are you here? What's the problem? Is it, maybe you are experiencing homelessness and you have nowhere to sleep, and that's why you're sleeping inside people's apartment buildings to try and find warmth. And they start working on the issues rather than, saying, well, what you're doing is, disrupting the community. We need to get you out of here. We need to move you along. They're actually saying, well, how do we help take these barriers down? And all of a sudden, the police and our staff are working in partnership, trying to get people into housing, or trying to get the right mental health supports provided to this person. And it's very much a solution-focused program. Rather than just keep these people, and for the police, there's a selfish side to this. they're using a ton of resources just responding to people sleeping in hallways or being in the wrong place or urinating out in public. And they're going, that's really a waste of our time and our resources. But out of caring for our community, how do we then move them forward? And how do we help them address the barriers in that? So we've been doing this partnership for about a year now. We have, I think, we have about 10 staff who work downtown out of a building that's combined with the police and a bunch of other agencies. And it's been an amazing partnership. In my 23 years, I've never seen so many agencies working so closely together in Edmonton. In the one building, we have the police, we have Alberta Health Services, we have an organization called Homeward Trust, we have Boyle McCauley Health Center, we have Bent Arrow, we have, just the list goes on. And all these resources are now under one roof. And so when we're working with people, we can then just walk down the hall and say, hey, we need housing. How do we start accessing housing? Or victim services is in there. How do we get them into counseling? And so this program is just, like I said, is taking off, and it really is an exciting time to walk alongside and be part of this partnership with EPS. And I guess lastly is we'll be opening a wellness center in about 3 months from now, kind of late September, early October. And I see a lot of people going, well, what's a wellness center? A wellness center is going to be based on an allied health model. And I know people are going, well, what is an allied health model? Which I didn't know until I was told by somebody who runs one of our other wellness centers. Allied health is sort of, you have primary care, which is your doctors, nurses, so all the physical and medical side. Allied health is that other part of healthcare. So in our wellness center, we'll have an OT, counseling therapist, we'll have advocates, we'll have employment services, and a variety of other of those supports and services that make up when you think about a holistic care for people. So we'll be doing that out of this building, which will be down the Oliver area in the near future. And so we're excited to get that open and to see just all the services that that'll offer and the people it will support. So that's kind of the quick, like I said, this is in 2.5 years. The changes that happened from 2019 to 2022 were just incredible for Mustard Seed. And I go back to Psalm 128. I go back to the idea of being faithful, about being obedient. The Mustard Seed, from its inception, was called to serve the most vulnerable in Edmonton. You were part of that vision. You're part of that faithful calling, saying, it's not enough to just be a church in the inner city or a church in Edmonton. It's not enough just to sit on a hill, but we need to be the light. We need to be that beacon on top of that hill. We need to be a church that's called to more than just showing up on a Sunday morning. And that vision continues to live out at the Mustard Seed. In 1999, when I first started there, I think there were 7 staff, maybe 8. We have about 140 staff right now. We have 7 different buildings in the city. And that started with a faithful calling 35 years ago. And the obedience to that calling. The fruit of our labor, our prosperity, is to see the lives changed and transformed through the love of Jesus. This is the blessing that we desire, and this is the blessing that we pursue. If you go back, like I said, to go to Psalms 128, we talk about, your faithfulness and your obedience, and then God's blessing in that. So if we are faithful and obedient to God's calling, and if you I'm going to jump around on scripture here, and if you jump over to Matthew 22, and you look at the greatest commandment, to love God and to love others, if we're obedient and faithful to that, then we will be a blessing to those in our communities, those in our neighborhoods, those in our nation, those in our family, even when we find it difficult to love them. It just runs together. If we're faithful and obedient, and our greatest calling is to love others, then we can't help but be blessings to others. So how are you a blessing to others? And where are you? Is it in your community? Maybe some of you are called to come down and volunteer again at the mustard seed. But then maybe some of you are called to go work with new Canadians as they settle into our country. Or it's to work with seniors who are in different homes and often isolated. But I think it's the biggest question is saying, if I'm going to live out and be obedient to God's calling on my life, and God's calling at its highest is for me to love others, then how am I going to be a blessing to others? Whether they're experiencing homelessness in our city or simply struggling with isolation in our communities, where and how are you going to be a blessing to others? Let me pray. Blessed are you, Lord, God of mercy, who through your Son gave us a marvelous example of what it means to live out the greatest commandment, to love one another. Send down your blessings on your servant, who so generously devote themselves to helping others. And when they are called in times of need, let them faithfully serve you in their families, in their communities, their neighborhoods, their nations. And help us each day to stand as a people, as your people, for healing, for good, for the diverse body of Christ in all creation, because we know that that is what you desire. That you have called us to be faithful, and in that faithfulness you will continue to bless us. But that blessing is not meant to be kept. It is meant to be given away. And God, I just pray that you would call us to be blessings, to live that out, and to be obedient to you. We're thankful today that you have gathered us, that you have given us this opportunity to worship you and to hear from your word. But most of all, I am thrilled and I am excited, God, that you have called us to not just be here in this building, to be in this community, to be a people that love people. And that you have called us to be a light on top of a hill, to be a beacon of hope for those who may not have hope. And in this, I know that you will bless. I pray these things in your name. Amen.